squeeze and loosen it from the container. And I just watered these last night pretty heavily. I recommend watering, yeah, the day before, the night before, but right before, it's not necessary. You don't need a soggy, you know, but it just slides right out that way. If it was dry, it would be, there'd be a little bit of damage to the roots. It's just moist before you transplant. And then you can take a look at the roots. You can see like they haven't completely started swirling around the bottom and getting what's called root bound. So this is a good time to transplant. Now, with these vining species and tomatoes specifically, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your thumbnail and you're just gonna pinch, these off. These, what I pinch off, I don't want to stay in the area of where I'm transplanting because these will start to rot and maybe potentially encourage the type of fungus and bacteria and pests that like to feed on, you know, rotten tomato, you know, pieces. So just handle them correctly, get them out into your compost pile or away from, you know, the garden. That's just a little aside, just good practice. It's good hygiene. So I pinch those off. Now I was describing to some of the participants here that plant cells are called totipotent or totipotent, meaning they're going to specialize like a stem cell of a human. They can specialize into any organ or type of cell that's in the plant's genome. So under the right conditions, when stimulated. So if I bury this plant up to here, then all this will start to produce roots. These little hairs here, you can see these little hairs, they'll start to differentiate and become root cells. And then you're gonna have way more root, you know, a base for root development than if I just plant this part here. So this is a great time when you transplant to give the plant a chance to get a really sturdy base. So, you know, what I want to do, if I'm going to plant these directly in the ground, which I could roll the dice and do that today, you know, but maybe I still have to prepare my ground a little bit better, you know what I mean? Or still have to get my rototiller, I got to work that soil. Then transplanting is a good thing to buy you some time because you're going to give it the nutrient it needs. So generally I don't want anything touching, you know, the roots or there's little feeder roots and, you know, anchor roots and that kind of thing. But and I don't want a whole lot of UV exposure. UV can kind of kill the little beings, the mycorrhizae and stuff with exposure. So, you know, I just want to be kind of quick about taking it out and then getting it into the dark, back into its, you know. So, you know, I'll put some in there. It's really loose material. And then, you know, you'll find that maybe just a very little bit, you know, maybe half full, and then you're going to have to kind of work it out to the sides. This container is about on its last year of use. You'll find that. So I'll lay it down, get it down on the bottom here. And in order to get all that stem buried, I don't want to contort it too much, you know, plant yoga a little bit. It's a little bit of plant yoga, but see how I'm kind of pushing it down in. And then I want this thing to be proud, meaning I want it to be straight up and down. So I'm going to have to just kind of, you know, it's very malleable at this stage. So I'm going to want to kind of push it down in there and get the head of it, I call it the head of the plant, up. So normally I do this on like a bench right here. Doesn't need to be right in the middle of the pot. In fact, those guys that do bonsai, no plant goes directly in the middle of the pot because that's the space for, you know, God or the creative being, right? That's the place for the divine is right in the middle. So make room for God. So don't worry about centering it exactly. You know, it's going to pull nutrients from the whole pot. But you see how I'm supporting the head of this tomato plant up while I pack in the soil around it. And you're gonna snap plants. You're gonna snap tomato plants trying to do this. That happens. You just say a prayer and put it in the compost pile. Don't try to do mouth to mouth. You know, it's done. you did it. And then so I'm firm down in. So in order for this plant to send its roots into the new medium, it's got to be in contact. You got to eliminate about as much of the air as you can. So I'm firming it, but I'm not overdoing it. I'm just pushing most of the air out because when I water it, that's going to force a lot of the air out. And then, you know, just top it off kind of. So yeah, it doesn't look picture perfect, but it's what we want. You know, it's what we want. That stem is kind of bent and pushed down in there, and then the root ball is down in there. And so all of that now is going to be able to produce roots. So when we go to plant this thing, it's almost just as much root as it is top. Perfect, because you're encouraging this thing to root into the ground first, set up its base, its foundation, and then jack in the beanstalk. So yes.
I'm just gonna ask. So if you bought like a bag of that seed catapult, but to like cut costs and also maybe possibly help the bacteria and stuff start working together, would it be a good idea to take some of the soil where you're gonna transplant it from, mix them together, and then put that into the pots when you pot them?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the, I think, mixing in some native soil when you transplant is a great idea. It's going to save costs. You're gonna get the plant acclimated to where it's going to actually go. I think that's brilliant. I think that's really smart. Yeah. And then, you know, like I said, the mycorrhizae is sort of ubiquitous. You're going to find it in any good compost. So if you made your own compost, blend your compost with your native soil. You're going to want to lighten the texture up a little bit for that new root growth. So, you know, I do recommend, you know, a little bit of, my favorite product is cocoa peat. It's milled up coconut hulls, you know, as opposed to, and you can find it in a grow shop. You know, there's one out in North Lima. You know, it's just called like gardening indoor or whatever. But you find a grow shop, a local grow shop, and they sell it in bricks. I'm wary of anything you buy in a plastic container or wrapped in plastic. Okay, I don't want to point you in the direction of products and that kind of thing. So that's a really good point. You know, compost, make your own compost. I think regionally we could work where I could bring over piles of finished compost here, and you could work something out with you know, the center, and you can get 5-gallon buckets of this stuff, and you can, you know, we'll go out and get the cocoa peat and amass it in here. The cool thing is it's a condensed brick. You put it in a big tub like that, green tub, fill it with water, and the next day you've got tons of this stuff. It gets huge, and it's sustainable product. It's the byproduct of the coconut industry, as opposed to peat, like peat moss is dredged from peat bogs, and it's kind of destructive. It is destructive to carbon sequestration and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Commercial plant starter. You know, that's what I started my plants at home in. But this, are you recommending to mix when I transplant it into something, mix it with this? And what about if I have a plot or a raised box or something?
Yeah.
Mix this into the soil?
Yeah, so this is just one of the products that Ohio Earth Foods sells. They also have, there's a product that's called Myco Apply, which is the mycorrhizae in a powdered form in a dormant phase, and it is also available at grow stores, and you'll find just a little bit goes a long way. Just powdered sugar, you know, put it over top of whatever soil you have. If you had the commercial stuff to start out with, you know, when you planted your seeds, you know, you could have powdered that in there, and then as the water, the moisture, and the heat to germinate, and then as soon as your seed germinated, it's gonna form that relationship. Now you have a culture. That's like this tray right here. This, I think, may have actually been like just like Miracle-Gro.
Right.
You know what I mean? I had some potted plants at home or something like that, but I put the Myco Apply in this. Now this tray is sad because these were pepper seeds that you know, my friend gave me that were from like 2017 or something. She's like, I really want these, you know, ají dulce, like a Caribbean type pepper or something. I was like, okay, let's try. I filled this whole thing with seed, and we got that little corner, which is a win. For old seed like that, I mean, we got, this is precious to us right here, this little corner that did it. The fact that they came up so well in that corner tells me something wasn't right about the moisture or something on this side, but they're popping slowly. I see their little guys are just starting to pop in here, so this is a win. But this was commercial Miracle-Gro, powdered with the mycorrhizae, and now I have a culture of Myco Apply. Myco Apply. So MyCoApply, and it's a little baggy. It's not too expensive, and you could keep one of those bags around for 2-3 seasons. You'd have all the mycorrhizae culture that you would need. Plus, as you're utilizing it in your garden and transplanting into it, it's spreading through your garden. Eventually, you won't need it. Whenever you want to go transplant, you go take up some of your own soil. If it's managed correctly, if it's continually fed, and there's live plants for it to connect with, you can keep your culture going. Somebody's gonna post notes on this video and refute that. But hey, power of the observer, okay? Observer effect. This is how physics works. When we believe and know these things, we start to interact with them on a level that's, I think, a metaphysical level that, is powerful. So, the design. Interact with it as such, and it will manifest. That's my opinion. That's my experience. So, transplanting a tomato like that, you wanna really bury a lot of the stem, and you're gonna get a good start on that. Okay. Now, this is a different type, and then immediately, is there water in these? One thing that I like to do once I get it to this is I like to submerge it. I like to really put it in a tray and just like submerge it in water and soak it in completely. Watering above, you just gotta be. I mean, most of you guys are gonna have. Most of you folks are gonna have a hose with a nozzle on it. You're gonna have a hose with a nozzle on it that you can control. And this is just one of those things where you put some care into shower. Usually put some care, and I like that right there. That's great. I think I got a kink in the hose, which is giving me that. When you water like that and just let it sink in, so it's going to pool up, let it sink in. And if you had a whole tray of these transplants, you wouldn't be wasting your time. You would do half, and then you go to this half, and that would have sunk in, and then you can come back to this half and let that pool up. And then you can come back to this half, and then until you know that it's soaked. It's soaked in. You've almost overwatered it, right? Just saturated it. That's great. And then you won't have to come back. You won't have to disturb the soil. You won't have to disturb anything for a while until it starts to show that it's getting a little bit crusty. I like to create an influx of moisture where it goes from wet, saturated, to moist, to nearly dry. You feel it. It's like, this is dry. This is light and dry, to then saturated again. So then it can go moist, dry, saturated, moist, dry. That pump, it's like a workout. It's like root yoga. They start to reach out for the moisture's down at the bottom now, or the moisture's up at the top, and it starts to like really explore that space. And then your roots they're worked out. They didn't, because if it's saturated all the time, they'll just sit and kind of like suck the moisture, and they won't really reach and move, and there's no dynamic growth happening. So yeah, and what's nice about that is just saturate them once every 3 days, depending on your conditions, where the ventilation and the heat, whatever it's like. Soak them once every 4 days, whatever. Now you're not, I gotta water my plants every day. No, you don't. You shouldn't.
I'll stop beating myself up about that.
Yeah, no, about water levels, no. Dry is not a bad thing as long as it's not persistent dry. As soon as they're dry, you can go ahead, go for it. But anyway, so that we've got that, and then the plants with indeterminate growth or vining plants that are just gonna, get real, the vining plants, tomatoes specifically, are gonna want to get planted deep like that. These are eggplant, and we're just gonna do one of these real easy. I'm not gonna pinch, so I'll do the same thing. Try not to hold, the leaves are more tender than the stem, so I'll hold it down at the bottom, and I'll just do this little squeeze and pull. This could probably stay in here a little bit longer. You can see by the amount of roots that are showing. Usually you want a little bit more root showing before you, like I said, those could be in there longer. But you get your soil. It ain't gonna be mad about me giving it fresh nutrients though. and being in a bigger place, you know, it's gonna like that. You don't want to do it too early. Those little pepper plants, transplanting that is just a shock to it. You know what I mean? This plant is beyond the stage where you can shock it by transplanting it. So you just make a little divot in the fresh material, push it down in, you know, get it firm, and then just top fill in around here. And hit the corners and then press it in. And now what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that I'm not covering too much of that stem up. And you can cover up a little bit more than was covered up when you transplanted it, because the water's going to wash it down. It's going to settle down in, and it'll almost choose where it wants to be in a way, you know. I think they have more awareness than we give them credit for, and they'll be like, I'm too deep, and they'll like push themselves up a little bit, you know. They know where they want to be, as long as you don't bury it, you know. So these are the seed leaves. When you plant a seed, the first things that are going to come out, the first leaves that are going to come out are these leaves right here. These are not true leaves. They're called seed leaves, or cotyledons. Cotyledons are seed leaf, that cotyledon, I guess. That's like whatever, Greek. So they're vestigial. I don't know. They fall off. They fall off naturally. So on the tomatoes, I pruned those off and I buried it to those leaf scars, or where those stem scars were. On these, I'm just gonna leave them. They're still collecting some light. They're like solar panels here, collecting energy for the root growth even. And so, you know, don't bury it too far up so that you're like covering your seed leaves. You know, they need to be proud and above. So, and then same you know, idea as far as watering. I think I got it in there.
It's over here.
Oh, okay, yeah. Don't want to displace too much soil level, you know. This is what I do in my sink at home. You know, I have a rack, like a wire rack that I grow seedlings on at home. As far as lighting goes, to raise your seedlings when the days are short and they can't be outside, I don't recommend trying to raise seedlings on a windowsill. You can do like lettuce, maybe, you know, and you have to be vigilant about the exposure, because it's just going to stretch and it's not going to be a good product. You know, it's not going to be tasty. Don't be alarmed if your plant lays down initially. It'll stand back up once this has got plenty of water and it knows where the sun is and it's reoriented. You're going to need to provide some sort of light, and I like the 4-foot shop lights. I like the fluorescent lights, the 4-foot typical. There's all kinds of lights out there, right? There's T5s, which are nice. They're like a T5 high output, full spectrum. Full spectrum is what you're looking for. Okay, full spectrum of light. You don't want just yellows and you don't want just blues. You want the whole thing. So it's closest thing to natural light. And the plants seem to. I've done the T5s right next to the fluorescents, the typical fluorescents. I guess they're both fluorescents. T5s are fluorescents too. They're high output. They're smaller. You can get them on Amazon for relatively cheap, and they're lightweight, and they're less clunky than the shop lights, than your typical fluorescent lights. But I found that the plants like the old school light better. They like the frequency better than the T5. But the T5 is really good supplemental. So if I have one of those 4-foot wire rack systems, and I've got my flats and I've got my plants, you know, lined up there, I want to run a shop light down the middle, and then maybe a T5 on either side, so that I'm getting light out. Because if I don't do that, the plants are going to bend toward the light. They're going to get stretched on the edges of the, you know, if I want to utilize that whole shelf, okay? Or just get two shop lights. And a lot of people have them, you know, they're in a garage and you're not using them anymore or something. They're affordable, and the bulbs are easy to get. And so I recommend going the standard fluorescent shop light, 4-foot shop light. I've had nothing but good results with them. There are fancier. There's help me out. What's the most the light bulbs that are really efficient.
Oh, LED.
LEDs. There are LEDs that have different spectrums of light, but that's not the investment I'm trying to make. When it comes to plants, I'm trying to make my investments in soil. I'm trying to do, other type of investments. The lighting is not as big of a deal for me. This was a little wilty. So, we've gone over vining plants and how to transplant there. Quickly, seeding. I don't want to make seeding too complicated. I think that a lot of people's anxiety about gardening starts with seeding, so we're just going to make this easy. I'm putting this loose material here, and I like to level it off. I use containers like this. These are old fish containers from restaurants, and I just level it off and keep it loose. And then one thing I'll do is I'll moisten that so that I'm moving around the soil now, as opposed to if it's all dry and then I plant the seed and then I water it, the soil's going to move and it's going to settle, and that seed is going to get all crazy. So just water it, pre-soak it. Which, like I said, when I have a flat of these containers, and so if you're pressed for space, which most of us are, because we're doing this indoors in our house, in our kitchen, or whatever, our living room, then what I like to do is I like to take, let's see, we'll do some, I got beets here, I got collards, I got parsley. This is anything, herbs, greens, anything. Here's mustard greens. Let's do mustard greens. What we can do is take just a 4-inch, or this is a 3-inch pot, and we could save space in our, so that you only have 1 or 2 fluorescent lights, so you don't have to fill a whole, bread rack thing and have this whole grow station in your house. Space is key, and the light is at a premium because you pay for that light, So instead of doing whole entire flats of vegetables that you're not going to need or whatever, and or not knowing, when they're gonna, if they're gonna germinate well, these mustard seed, I just take a pinch and then, bless you, I'm just gonna sprinkle these on top. I'm just gonna sprinkle them on top, not too dense. You could take a look at that pattern there. There's maybe, the half a pinky width between all these seeds. And I don't do the whole inch, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch. Few people except for like carpenters, machinists know what that is. I do, this spacing in between plants, 2 of these between a tomato plant, 2 or 3 of them. I use whatever I know I'm gonna have on me, my hand, my foot, or my favorite shovel or something like that. The width of my shovel, 2 shovel widths for my pathways. 3 shovel widths for the width of the bed, because that's about 30 inches, and 30 inches is what I can work comfortably from both sides, reaching into the middle, but create these conventions that are yours, relative to you. So yeah, just a sprinkling, and maybe I'll put a little bit extra, because I'm not concerned if these all pop up and I got 60 mustard green plants. I can then read which ones are the most healthy and just go in there with a little pair of scissors, or pick out the ones that are behind, pick out the better genetics based on, what's popped first. And now I've got 30 plants right here. That could fill a whole row, right here, instead of a tray, and I put all the material and I got to get all that under light. I can get this under light real easy, So I'm just gonna, the convention here for the depth of planting is twice the diameter of the seed. Whatever the thickness of the seed is, twice that. So, give or take, once it's wet. So I'm just gonna sprinkle this lightly on here. I pretty much filled it so that I knew that I would be topping it off. That would be my depth. And then, it's kind of a smoothing, like cake icing sort of process. And then pat it down so that whenever you water it, it's not gonna go all over, crazy all over the place. And then this is where you're gonna be, especially careful, where you're just gonna kind of give it a quick, settle everything in. I'm pushing a little bit of the soil around, but not much. And like I said, there'll be less waste when it comes to water when I have a tray. And I like KIM. Keep it moving to the KIM. Just keep it moving. You know what I mean? Like that's usually the best natural way. So, you know, that I might give another shot or two of water to, but that's it. Okay. So the sets are a no-brainer. We talked about the sets. Make a hole with your thumb, set them in, just so that they can get covered up. Onion sets, garlic is the same way. We can get a little bit more into depth when it comes time to plant those, maybe in the next video, but we've covered a lot maybe today. So please send your comments and questions to the center here, and we'll get them answered.
How often would you water that pot with the seeds in it?
This pot with the seeds, I would make sure it stays in the moist stage. So if we're saturated, moist, and dry, keep it in moist all the time. So, I mean, you can saturate to moist, but let it get to the moist stage before you saturate again. Do not leave it saturated. You know what I mean? Moist is where you want it. So that means really you're not going to saturate deep. You're just going to get it watered and then let it go into moist for a couple of days. Watered, moist, but don't let it crust. Don't let it dry, because that will suspend the enzymatic activity for germination. And once you've suspended that, after you got it started, it's done. The embryo's pretty much, you know, it's no longer a viable embryo, because you started the process and then you stopped it. It doesn't really work that way. Once you start it, you got to keep it moist. So, but you'll know. And then as soon as it emerges, you got a much more resilient thing. It can handle some drying of the top. But good question.
And how deep should this be then?
Oh, the set
Later,
here.
yeah.
Just do a little zoom in over here on this soil here. So there are things planted in here.
Yeah,
I
this
assume.
is whatever.
I'm gonna do it right here.
Okay, great.
Take your thumb, push it down, put the set in, set it, and you got the roots here at the bottom, pointy little hat. Put the hat up, the roots down, set it down in there. I pushed it even a little bit deeper, and then like this. You can still see the tip of the hat. That's fine. That's fine. But that's it.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jim, for having me.
We've given you a lot of information. Parker is a veritable encyclopedia walking around with his plants. And we thank you for staying with us. If you've seen the whole video already, that's great. If you have questions, go back and look at it again, or feel free to call us. And next Saturday again, we'll plan?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.